All right, so I'm not going to review much from last night. You can go back and watch that recording, because the information I want to give you today, I want to make sure you get it in one chunk. I gave a little bit of an overview last night on that last slide, but again, it's kind of going back to our discussion of the angelic beings and what is their job, what is their role, what is our relationship to them. Why is it a mistake for us to be mistaken for them? For us to be perceived as divine beings or celestial beings when we are not divine. We are made in the image of Elohim, but we are only Elohim with a small e. We're only sons of Elohim. We are the reflection of Elohim, but we are not the source itself. There's only one source. And so with the angels, I think often that same mistake is made, where people mistake angels as being divine. They are not divine, they are celestial. They do operate in realms. We might say the heavenlies, because there are several, at least 7 realms of heaven that we can't perceive right now. Maybe the lower ones. You can look into the sky maybe and perceive a level below the third heaven, but even the third heaven is not that high. So at any rate, it's never a good idea to misplace a recognition of an angel's authority over a particular domain to treat him as if he is divine, because he is only the messenger. He is only an appointed prince. We're going to use just the English translation for now, because typically in Hebrew, it's going to be Sar, like Sarah, princess. You can hear the same root in there, because Sarah would be feminine and then Sar would be masculine. You've heard one of the names of Messiah was going to be Sar Shalom, or Prince of Peace. That's his domain, is going to be peace. And so a prince, it kind of carries with it not just the idea of being a son of the king, but it also has an idea that there is a domain assigned to a prince. Maybe that's where we're having trouble crossing over from Hebrew to English, but kind of attach that understanding when you read the English word prince in scripture. Check the context, because it may not just be talking about, oh, this is a prince, this is a son of a king. What it might be saying is, this is a prince, this is an appointed ruler. And you'll see sometimes in like the tribal accounts, how the different tribes did different things in the journeys in the wilderness. They will talk about maybe the princes of a particular tribe. It doesn't mean that they are sons of a king. It means that they are appointed officials in some way. And so that's what we want to do today, is kind of break down those relationships with angels, because angels, oddly, they just keep popping up. It's not just in the prophets, like with Daniel. We're reading about these guys in the Torah. So there's something important about them to be understood. And if we can understand that, then I think we're going to get better at decoding what all these angels in the book of Revelation are doing and why they're behaving in a certain way. And so we will bring Daniel into it, because from Daniel, I think we get illustration of something that it's almost assumed when you read the Torah. It's as if when you read about this struggle between Jacob, and at first it says he's a man, and often it will say angels are men. That's the confusing thing too, just like Elohim, Elohim, man, angel. Well, is it a man or is it an angel? It's an entity, maybe. All right, it's a particular being. It doesn't mean it's a human being, if that makes sense. And then of course that class of angels called the Ishim, they do have a very human appearance, which might be why, part of the reason why he says, let us make man in our image, that this particular class of angels had the appearance is that we'll make them look like you. All right, we think angels are able to make themselves look like us. Maybe the reverse is true. Maybe we were made, at least in our physical appearance, to look a little bit like them as created beings. But I think Daniel gives us the illustration of why do we feel like we're missing something in the struggle between the angel and Jacob. It's, the angel of the Lord that goes with him in the wilderness. It's like there's an assumption that we have all this information about these angelic beings or these princes over domains, and we really don't know. All we know is grandma used to have a little angel hanging from her rearview mirror. We don't know why, but maybe you've heard people say, my guardian angel, my guardian angel. Well, it's almost as though the guardian angel becomes the object of trust and faith or expectation, rather than the one who appointed the guardian angel. So we want to keep that straight, because if you try to worship an angel, they're going to reject that out of hand. Like, no way, don't do that. They understand what their mission is, and they understand that they are not creator, they are created. We're the ones who tend to get confused about those things. So let me share my screen. And minimize this. And also, I forgot to say the last couple of weeks, probably, if you're new to the class, once I turn the recording off at the end of the lesson, please feel free during the class discussion, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from and, something about you, so that we can get to know you. Because often we don't, if we're working or something or doing something in the background, or we got crazy dogs running around, we may not turn on our video sometime. But do feel free to introduce yourself if you're new to the class and you haven't done that yet. All right, so just to kind of reset from last night, we know these angels, the usual word is malakim, which is like messengers. They have a specific mission. They typically do one thing at a time. They have one domain at a time. And they're appointed officials, like a deputy. And like a deputy, they'll go serve the warrant. Whatever the Holy One wants them to do, they go serve it. There are different domains that these angels can be assigned to, from something as small as maybe somebody's ministering angel, a guardian angel, to princes over principalities. I mean, they're over even something as large as a beast kingdom, like the kingdom of Persia or Babylon or Greece and so forth. And we'll look at that today. They might be appointed to a population center. It doesn't have to be an entire empire. It can be a population center. And sometimes their missions are counterproductive. Not counterproductive. They are counter to one another. In other words, we're going to look at that in Daniel. What happens if you have a prince, if you have this angel appointed to take care of Persia and to make sure that the empire of Persia is maintained? But then Daniel starts praying, and the answer to Daniel's prayer is somehow going to expose a weakness in Persia, and therefore the prince of Persia may rise up against the angel Gabriel and stand in his way. He doesn't want Daniel to get the message, because Daniel's going to write it down. And Daniel's going to let everybody know about the end of Babylon. He's going to let them know about the end of Medo-Persia. He's going to let them know about the end of Greece. He's going to let them know about the end of the beast systems in the nations, those Roman systems. So he doesn't want the word to go out. Remember, that's his assignment. And so this assignment coming in, we know that Gabriel had to have help from an angel we usually read as Michael. That's Michael. And so we want to clarify, why does he need help? And why does he need help from this particular angel? Because there's other angels out there, right? And this kind of traces back to Yeshua teaching a lesson in hermeneutics to the Judeans, who say he's blaspheming by calling himself a son of God or a son of Elohim. And so he's straightening it out. He gives them the context. He says, Elohim is not always the creator. Sometimes it is someone appointed to do something, someone appointed to rule over a certain thing, to have a particular authority, or even just a judge, just an ordinary judge, Elohim, right? So And the verse, just to remind us, the verse we're working with is Song of Songs 3:6. What is this coming up from the wilderness? Like columns of smoke, perfumed with myrrh and frankincense, with all the scented powders of the merchant. And remember, those scented powders is dust. It's kicking up the dust of Jacob. And that's what we're still unpacking. What is the dust of Jacob? What is the dust of Jerusalem? We'll put it that way too. It talks about the precious stones, cherishing the precious stones in the dust of Jerusalem might be related. So when Israel comes up from the wilderness, remember the misconception on the part of the nations who were watching her there was that they had become fiery ministers. They had literally been transformed into celestial beings. And of course, they became terrified. And so the clarification has to be made. They were not really celestial beings like an angel. They were not divine, even though they were ministers of fire for Elohim. Right? But this terror that falls upon the nations, we're going to see this again. The prophets are going to talk about this again as it refers to the end times. And that interests us. If we find Torah prophecy and we find prophet prophecy, then it helps us to decode again what is going on here in the book of Revelation. And we're relating the dust, the scented powders of Israel when she comes up from the wilderness, that's avakah. And this dust, they trace it back to the avak, or the wrestling match that Jacob had with what they say is Esau's angel. We're not gonna put a period at the end of that sentence. All right, we'll just leave that open-ended. We'll look at the evidence and we'll see if we think that's Esau's ministering angel. But as a result of that wrestling match, the sages say that Jacob achieved the ability to bless each of those 12 sons with a specific blessing to bring to the whole. The 12 tribes bringing those scented powders, or that dust of Jacob, together to represent all the blessings that would fall upon the house of Israel, right? So we're just going to move on the assumption, let's say that's true. Let's say that this wrestling match at the Yavok River, that this man/angel that Jacob wrestled with, let's say it was Esau's ministering angel. Is there any evidence? And there's a picture of the Yavok River. If you're wondering, was it really a river? No, it's more like a stream. Okay, it's not a huge thing. Maybe in the rainy season, it might be much bigger than that, but you can see just crossing back and over this stream would not have been a huge deal. It's just the crossing back and forth. It's not going to be, I think, significant in terms of the crossing or passing. And so here's what the interaction is in Genesis 32:26. He says, the angel says, "Let me go, for the dawn is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And this came up last night in the after class. So it was a pretty incredible discussion. So I brought that in for today. "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." And he said, "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel." Because remember, your name or your calling defines your purpose. And he says, "For you have contended with God." And remember, this is either going to be Elohim, the creator, or Elohim, an appointed being, a son of Elohim, a created being of Elohim, and with men, and have prevailed. And Jacob asked him and said, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And he blessed him there. So Jacob named the place Peniel, for he said, "I have seen God, Elohim." And again, with Hebrew, you don't know if it's a big E or a little e. You have to read context. "I have seen Elohim face to face, yet my life has been spared." Right? So if we match that against what Exodus 33:20 tells us, it says, "You cannot see my face, for mankind shall not see me and live." right? So these two verses seem to conflict. Jacob says, I have seen him, yet my life has been spared. But Exodus 33:20 says, you can't see it. There has to be a veil between us. There has to be something like putting Moses in the cleft of the rock. So let's find more evidence. Let's find out, did he literally wrestle with his creator? Or did maybe he wrestle with an appointed Elohim sent by Elohim, someone who represents some aspect of Elohim? And by asking what his name is, what Jacob is doing is saying, what aspect? Your name tells you your aspect. It tells you your purpose. It tells you your calling. What is your mission here? What is your job? That's why naming is so important. It pins on a child what the expectations are that this child's purpose in life will be. So later, the next day, when Jacob meets Esau in Genesis 33:10, Jacob says, no, please, if I have found favor in your sight, then accept my gift from my hand, for I see your face as one sees the face of Elohim, and you have received me favorably. Right? So there's a resemblance here. And of course, they say your ministering angel will resemble you in some way. It will have a similar appearance to you. And so the question from our context, is he talking about, I see your face as one sees the face of Elohim, our creator? Or do I see your face as the face of an Elohim that I struggled with all night long, who was sent from Elohim, the creator? And he says, you have received me favorably. And so that favorable reception, possibly he sees that going back to, I'm not going to let you go until you bless me. And here he acknowledges, you have received me favorably. So that blessing is stuck. So let's keep reading. All right. We don't have to decide right now whether it's Elohim big E or Elohim small e, or whether this is even Esau's ministering angel. We don't have to make up our minds right now. Let's just keep reading, because we keep finding information. If we know these angels are appointed for a specific task. 2 Peter 2:10, Peter, who walked with Yeshua, so we would say he is a primary source for us, absolutely a primary source. If he understood anything about principalities and powers, and he learned it from Yeshua, then we have it, I don't want to say from the horse's mouth, but we have it practically through the mouth of Yeshua. And so Peter says, especially those who indulge the flesh in its corrupt passion and despise authority. And that's our generation. They despise it. We're reaping the harvest of the 60s for sure. He says they're reckless, they are self-centered, and they speak abusively of angelic majesties without trembling. Right. So Peter is telling us we need to acknowledge that there are angelic majesties in place. Now, are they just randomly bad-mouthing angels? Well, look at what the referent is. They despise authority. What do we know about these angelic majesties? They represent levels of authority. Now, it's authority that's given to them. And we kind of looked at that last night about who gave the beast authority to act, to blaspheme the Holy One and those who dwell in heaven with him, who gave him the authority to act, 42 months? Did he derive that authority from the Holy One himself? Or is it the referent, actually the dragon, who is giving him this authority to do these blasphemies and to perpetuate this abuse upon the people of the earth? I think the referent there is the dragon. So here, I think the referent is despising authority. So these angelic majesties, sometimes they're acting upon a mission. Well, they're always acting upon a mission, without exception, unless there's some sort of fallen angel that I don't even want to get into. But let's just assume that sometimes when we hit a snag, that it's not the mean old devil with horns and a forked tail and a pitchfork, that perhaps it's an angelic majesty that, like Bilam, we're on our way to destruction in some way, and he sends this angelic majesty to block our way. And what did Bilam do? He spoke abusively. He was reckless. He was self-centered. He spoke abusively, and he's defying the authority of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh. The first message was don't go. And he tries to figure out a way to go anyway. He's like, okay, you want destruction? I'll send you to destruction. But I'm going to warn you along the way. And he sends this angelic majesty to block the way and sends him with a message. And so the donkey has more reverence for the angelic majesty than Bilam does. She recognizes his authority before Bilam does, because he is so reckless in his mission, because he is so self-centered in his mission, that he does speak abusively. Of course, he's laying it on the donkey because he doesn't even perceive him at first. And that's the trouble with reviling sometimes an obstacle that comes into our way, and rebuking Satan here, there, and everywhere, when what if this is an angelic majesty who has been placed in the way, at least for a season, for a period, for a reason, because you don't know all the switches, levers, and knobs that are going on in the universe. You're just a teeny tiny little speck in that whole plan. And so to simply just revile the angelic majesty who's doing his job, he's just doing what he was sent to do. Go stand in the way. That's your job right now. At the appointed time, he will move out of the way, right? But sometimes we just blame every obstacle on Satan. And in a sense, that's true, because a Satan is simply an adversary, Satan with a small s. And so if that adversary is actually doing something heaven has put it in place to do, and we talked about this in after class last night, I wish that had been recorded, was how do I pray? How do I pray against systems that I know are doing anti-Torah activities? But yet, what if these things have been set in place, like we said, to lure Pharaoh into the Reed Sea so he can be destroyed? And so that's at the end of those prayers, you say, nevertheless, not my will, but thine be done. I don't know all the switches and levers and knobs that you're turning right now, but let me pray according to your will. And then the news of the day, he'll have to straighten out. But the key here is don't speak abusively, because often I see a lot of disdain and disparaging of appointed, elected leaders when they do stupid things. And we have to be real careful about that, because what if they have and they have been, Adonai gives people the power to ascend to a certain position. He puts them up and he takes them down. So they're there doing a job, even if it looks like they're wrecking everything. He's put them in place to wreck it. He has to wreck that thing. And so often we're reviling somebody who's been put into a position that we can see they're trashing it. And he's saying, but I put that in place. You can speak against the sin, but be careful about speaking against an angelic majesty who might be actually doing the job. We have to kind of perceive that we don't see everything that's happening in the world around us. And then Jude goes on, and Peter and Jude, those were two of the letters that nearly didn't make it into the New Testament because the church council thought they were too Jewish. But in their too Jewishness, they very well understood angelic majesties. And here Jude says, in the same way, these people also, dreaming, defile the flesh, same thing, they reject authority and speak abusively of angelic majesties. So what goes hand in hand with speaking abusively of angelic majesties? It's a rejection of authority. It's being self-centered. And this is where, especially coming out of an evangelical background, I heard a lot of abusive language, a lot of binding and loosing of things that I don't think these were demons. I think there was a very real possibility that these were simply obstacles, that these were simply problems that were put into place and might have actually arisen because of the sin of a particular person. And so they're reaping the consequences of their sin, but now they're casting out devils here, there, and everywhere because they're reaping the reward of their behavior. And they reject that authority. That the Holy One does have the authority to put obstacles in our path in order to redirect us. If we won't listen to him any other way, he can put something in our path. So we have to discern before we start casting out demons, whether this is actually a demon, whether this is a consequence of our own dumb behavior, or whether this is a test for us. He wants to see how we're going to handle it, because he might be saying, hey, I still have the authority in your life. And you might think your next destination is A, but in my will, your next destination is not A. I might take you a different route than this place here. So the thing to understand about them, and because we can't see this, I think we're more likely to abuse them and speak abusively of them and reject their authority to do what they're doing. These majesties, they are full of kavod, which is glory. They are full of hod, which is honor. These are reflections. These are qualities that the Holy One places upon him. They reflect his authority in their job. What was the other one in Daniel? It was Adar, majesty. Well, yeah, majesties. I guess that goes with the English name, but there's a majesty to them. They have a royal quality to them because he places these qualities upon them to reflect the sanctity of their mission. They're appointed authorities. And so we don't want to wrestle with them when they're being obedient, unless that's part of the process, right? And typically, if you notice right here, what Jacob is wrestling with is his own Esau, because remember, Esau is his twin. Esau represents the beast within him that must be conquered. Jacob is wrestling with the red beast the same way that every one of his descendants is going to have to wrestle with the red beast and prevail to be called sons of Elohim. We have to do that. The spirit has to prevail over the soul. And so in this struggle, sometimes we think we're just fighting Satan who's out to get us, and he's hiding around every corner, when if this is Esau's angel, clearly he is sent to stand in Jacob's way. So you don't really hear Jacob, you see him wrestling, but you do not see him abusing him verbally. He's saying things like, what is your name? Tell me what your purpose is. Let me figure out what we're wrestling about here. He says, I'm not going to let you go till you bless me. I want a blessing out of your mouth. That's important. So these majesties, if we could see them, and every now and then human beings do, we see them in all their divine glory, instead of that first glimpse that when Jacob starts wrestling, he's wrestling with what he thinks is a man. And then, as it gets closer to daybreak, he realizes he's wrestling with this celestial being. He's dealing with an angel. He's dealing with an appointed being who was put in that place in order to test him. But what we understand too is they are created and they are under authority. And so if you're having trouble, if you think there is one of these things in your way, you don't appeal to them so much as you appeal to their creator. You appeal to the one who created them and placed them. It's he who often is trying to have a conversation with you and you're not listening. You're not aware of it. And he says, okay, I'll do something drastic enough that I'll get their attention. So you don't revile the majesty of the one who is sent. You appeal to their king who created you and say, why is this in my path? Explain to me why this is in my path. Do you want me to wrestle with it? Do you want me to just remain silent? Do you want me to just stop and camp right here until you tell me it's time to move? You go directly to him. And you have to, you have that advocate with the Father. You have Yeshua. Right? Does that mean an angel won't come and talk to you? I don't think it does. I think an angel could come and talk to you. But you have to be very careful, right? You would have to make sure that that angel is speaking according to truth and the word of God, because Satan can come as an angel of light. He can appear to be light. He can appear to speak the word to you. That's why it's better to have the direct dialogue, I think, than to have to deal with one of these majesties, because you don't know what he's up to. They don't typically reveal everything to you. It might be, they're going to give you just enough information to act like the angels in Lot. Like, dude, we got to get you out of town. They're not there to get him on a housing plan necessarily. They're not there to help him apply for Social Security or disability. They're not there for a recovery effort of all the stuff he's going to lose, those sorts of things. They're not there to arrange marriages for his daughters, apparently. None of these things are they concerned with. They're just trying to get him out of town and get him out of the fire judgment. And so, had he gone back to Abraham, I think that would have been a step closer to appealing to his creator. Instead, he's trying to negotiate with angels. I don't want to go there. I want to go there. But in Jacob's case, this majesty is appointed to confront him. And then the next day, when Jacob sees Esau, he says it's like seeing the face of Elohim, the creator, unless we are reading it as, I'm seeing your face like the face of an Elohim, which in Hebrew, if it's a or an, like that, if it's not a specific, it's that there's no equivalent in Hebrew for that. So you wouldn't say, was it an Elohim? You would say, was it Elohim? Right? Just Hebrew grammar there. Was it an Elohim, small e, appointed by Elohim, the creator? And so if this is true, then this Elohim is under Elohim's authority. And therefore, in a sense, Jacob did wrestle both with Elohim and an Elohim that apparently looked like Esau. Right. And, a prince of El, Yisrael, he will be a prince of El. You hear the Sar in there, you hear the El of Elohim in there, you hear the future tense with the Yod Yisrael. He will be a prince with God. And so if it's small e Elohim, then both are still true. This appointed Elohim was sent by Elohim. And he says, this is the fight, this is the struggle that you're going to need to have with Jacob in order for him to prevail so that I can bless his descendants. He's going to have to conquer Esau in order for his descendants to conquer Esau, or Edom, to conquer the red one, or the red beast, Rome. And so this came up last night in after class discussion, and Jeannie pointed out this incident with Manoah and his wife, and they're being told that, you're going to have a son, Shimshon. He's going to be a Nazarite from birth, and he's the type of Messiah. All right, he's prophetic of Messiah, several key things in his life. And she pointed out Manoah asks the angel's name, just like Jacob wanted to know the angel's name. And I just kind of put in tiny letters here. One tradition says that Esau's angel's name is Samael. And you don't really get that until you get into the extra biblical literature, like the pseudepigrapha. If you get into books like Enoch and those sorts of things, it might come up. I don't think his name at this point is that relevant, other than I want to point out that this is what they're doing. They're saying, what is your name? Because your name is your purpose. It's your calling. It's what you're appointed to do. And so it appears that both Jacob and Manoah, they know if they know the angel's name, then they can know the aspect of that angel's mission that is relevant to them. Because if they know the angel's mission, it's easier for you to internalize what's happening and say, what is expected of me in this wrestling match? Because the angels typically, there is something in their names that will reflect a divine attribute. In fact, it might even reflect a particular name of Elohim or a particular office of Elohim. One of the names, and this goes back to the interaction there with Manoah at that fiery, where he's taken up in the fire. He says, why are you asking my name, saying that it is wonderful, it's Pele. When we do the Micha Mocha, if you do that in your fellowship or your synagogue or wherever you go, your congregation, you might do the Micha Mocha as part of your liturgy. Who is like you, a Lord among the gods, awesome in holiness, working wonders, right? Pele. It means wonderful, miraculous. And so the angel says, why are you asking my name? Singing that it's Pele, it's wonderful, it's miraculous. And so this reflects one of the names of Elohim, which is Ose Vele. The P sound and the F sound are the same Hebrew letter. Whether you harden it into a P or keep it soft like an F, it depends on the kind of the grammar of the sentence. But if one of his names is Ose Vele, the one who works miracles, the one who works wonders. Well, this angel appears to be telling him the attribute that has been placed upon me to bring you this message, this name, this purpose, this calling, is I'm describing that a miracle is going to happen to you. Something wonderful is going to happen to you, and Adonai is going to make a miracle for you. Another angel whose name represents an aspect of the divine is Gabriel or Gabriel. Gabriel. That means the strength of El, or my strength is El. What is one of the names of God that would reflect? Well, El Gibor, God of strength, God of power. And so this is why we want to turn to Daniel, because there is enough of the angelic dynamic in the book of Daniel that it helps us to understand what's going on. So we're going to go to Daniel chapter 10 and look at some samples here out of Daniel chapter 10. And remember, Gabriel, he's talking to Daniel, right? He's been dispatched to answer Daniel's prayers in a very vivid way, in a very unusual way, because typically when you pray, you don't get an explicit visitation by an angel you can see and talk with. It could happen, happens rarely. So Daniel's a pretty special guy. But here's what Gabriel tells Daniel. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia was standing in my way for 21 days. Then behold, Michael, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me, for I had been left there with the kings of Persia, right? With the kings of Persia. But who is the chief prince over Persia? We're not really sure, I don't think, what his name is, but he's just referred to as the prince of the kingdom of Persia. And under his domain would be the well-being of the empire of Persia. And we say, well, it was horrible. Persia did horrible things. Well, it was appointed by Elohim for Persia to be one of the beast kingdoms and to do a lot of the good things that the Persian kingdom did. it's actually under the reign of the Persians that the Jews are going to be turned loose to go back and to rebuild their temple. So they were brought up to power for a specific purpose. Send the Jews back home, release them from the power of Babylon. So in that sense, you can see like, oh yeah, they were oppressive. But on the other hand, you actually have Cyrus, who is Koresh in Hebrew, and he's called a Mashiach. He's called a Messiah with small m, by the way. Why? Because he was anointed for a specific purpose. He released the Jews to go back and rebuild the temple, rebuild Jerusalem. So there's a prince over Persia, a being, and he's standing in the way of Gabriel, who's a strong angel, right? He reflects the divine attribute of strength, El Gibor. And so Gabriel has to call on another angel named Michael. Michael. Why Michael? Well, we're going to try to unpack that. And then as Gabriel goes on in the conversation, he says to Daniel, do you understand why I came to you? But I shall now return to fight against the prince of Persia. So I am leaving, and behold, the prince of Greece is about to come. And so often this is why we're told, we're not fighting against flesh and blood. You might think your physical enemy is your physical enemy, but who's over them? Which angelic being has the power over that domain? And so often we're praying against a person when actually that prayer, it has to extend up into the spiritual realms because the battle is taking place in the heavenly celestial places that we can't see. Because what's happening there is affecting what's happening here. You can see why the ancient peoples turned to the beings and started worshiping them as gods. They were reckless, they were self-centered, and they were turning to the created instead of the creator, the one who put them in place. So he says, here's what I'm doing. I have to go back and I have to fight again against the prince of Persia. Why does he need to do that? Well, because Persia is about to fall. Remember, Daniel's going to deliver the message to Belshazzar. Tonight, your kingdom is over. Well, in order for that kingdom to be over, that means another one is rising up. That one that's going to, no, he was the last Babylonian king. In order to make room for the Persian king arising, Babylon has this, okay, tonight, your kingdom's going to fall. And then Persia's going to come up. Now, Daniel's not going to be around for the end of the Persian Empire. He's not that old. But the recognition is, hey, I'm going to have to start waging war against when this prince of Persia arises, because only by breaking his hold and helping to understand this is the end of his strength, can Greece arise, and can the prince over Greece ascend as the next beast kingdom. You have to take down one prince, just like in the natural realm, in order to reinstate this other prince, not reinstate, but to instate this next prince, the prince of Greece. So apparently Gabriel, I don't know if he's in charge of it, but he's definitely a participant when there is regime change in these principalities and powers. It seems as though he has involvement in taking down the power of the prevailing prince, whichever beast kingdom it happens to be, so that the opening is made for the next prince of that principality to bring that natural leader up for military conquest. And he goes on in verse 21, he says, however, I will tell you what is recording in the writing of truth. Yet there is no one who stands firmly with me against these forces except Michael, your prince. Michael, your prince. See how he's defining for us principalities and powers in the high places, and how we don't always know what's going on. We're judging everything by what we see below. You know, all the intrigues, the conspiracies, the famines, the plagues, everything. We're judging everything simply by what we can see in the natural realm. But here in the book of Daniel, it tells us that there's battles going on in the heavenlies in order to take down one stronghold and to let another rise up at its appointed time. And he's saying, you know, the one who helps me, I am Gabriel, I am the strength of El, but the one who helps me is Michael, and he just happens to be, Daniel, your prince. Why is he Daniel's prince? Does that mean he's Daniel's guardian angel? No. We're going to look at that. Who is Michael? And what does he have to do with the house of Israel? And so apparently what we see in this scenario is that Daniel's visions have disturbed the prince of Persia, because what he is seeing in these visions is the end of the Medo-Persian Empire and the rise of Greece and eventually the rise of Rome. Just as it troubled King Nebuchadnezzar to hear Daniel's interpretation, you can see it's also disturbing the present king of Persia, his prince that's assigned over him. And they never want their rule to end, because remember, that's their job. Their job is to take care of the welfare of their kingdom. They're not really multitaskers in that respect, because if Greece arises, that's going to be adversarial to the Prince of Persia's domain. His job is to make sure Prince Persia is strong and on top, and they don't always recognize the end of that era. Their job is to keep it strong. So Daniel's visions, he perceives these as a threat. And so what does he do? He can't really harm another angel. He can't really harm Daniel, but he can stand in the way. He can get in the way. That's why I say, be careful. If there's an obstacle in your way, discern what it is. Pray and say, reveal to me, what is the source of this obstacle? How are you trying to get my attention with this obstacle and lead me in the straight path? I don't want to badmouth the obstacle when maybe you put it right there to redirect my steps so that I would stay on your path and not in the path that I've made up in my heart I need to go. We see, though, that Gabriel, even the strength of El, needed Michael's help to get through to Daniel. So there's something about Michael's domain that if you pair it up with Gabriel, that he can break through that spiritual resistance coming from the Prince of Persia. So Michael is going to signify the supreme reign. Remember, Michael means who is like El. There's no comparable entity. Every other entity is created. So it recognizes the supremacy of El. It recognizes there's no real competitor. You can stand in the way, but you're not a competitor. And the presence of Michael could remind this Prince of Persia, you're not in a competition with El, buddy, right? We understand your divinely appointed job is to take care of Persia, but you're not the ultimate authority. He, the Holy One, is the ultimate authority. And so I'm coming from the presence of El as Michael to remind you that you are not like him. You were created. And this apparently brings a breakthrough, because the Prince of Persia was fighting the strength of Gabriel. He's fighting back with an angelic strength. But when he sees Michael, who is like El, now he has to relinquish dominion. And that's why I say sometimes we're speaking against things we don't understand, because we don't understand authority and dominions, especially if we can't see them. And especially if we scorn natural authority and dominion, how will we ever recognize spiritual dominion and authority? It's unfortunate. Ride around with a law enforcement officer for a day and see how much people don't respect authority and dominion, even in a natural realm. So imagine what their relationship is with the Father. The one they can see versus the one they can't see. And his appointed angelic majesties, the one they can see, they can't respect him. how are they going to respect that? So we have to be careful. So where simply the strength of El was meeting resistance, there was something that goes with strength. And that something that goes with strength is dominion, ultimate spiritual authority. And that's what Michael represents, the dominion of El. In other words, you, Prince of Persia, you do not have the authority to override the will of the Holy One, and he has to bow to that. That's just a principle. And then we skip forward to chapter 12, verse 1. And of course, it's talking about end times. It says, now at that time, Michael, the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people, will arise. Now let's go back one slide. Michael's domain, remember, is his people, Israel. That's his domain. We don't have Michael as a personal guardian angel, but once we are joined to the nation of Israel, then he is an angelic majesty assigned over the house of Israel. And his strength is in his spiritual authority or dominion. So in order to get through to Daniel, he needed Michael, because it doesn't matter whether it's the king of Babylon, the king of the Medes, the king of the Persians, the king of the Greeks, the emperors of Rome. It doesn't matter what their strength is. They never had dominion over Israel. That is not theirs to have. They'd never had spiritual dominion over Israel. It is Michael who rules and protects in that area of dominion over the house of Israel. And so what the Prince of Persia can do is hold the Jews there in Persia, right? He can do it with strength, but what he does not have is the dominion, the spiritual dominion over them. And in that case, he has to step aside. That's the one thing he doesn't have, because that's the appointed dominion of Michael. This angel cannot take away the domain of another angel. Only the one who created the angels can take away the domain of that angel. And so this is what he says to Daniel. At that time, Michael, and up to this point, his spiritual dominion has been very subdued. Israel has been scattered over the earth. The forces of righteousness have been greatly subdued. But we know at the end of the last beast empire that Israel will arise. And they will rule and reign with Yeshua, and it will be an eternal kingdom. So he says, at that time, Michael, the angel, the majestic being who has dominion over the house of Israel, he says, that great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people will arise. When Israel arises, it's because Michael has basically gotten the signal. And so it says there will be a time of distress such as never occurred since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people, everyone who is found written in the book, will be rescued. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the ground will awake, these to everlasting life, but others to disgrace and everlasting contempt. So we see the two things together. Michael arises, and so does Israel. Right? Some are going to arise, it says, to everlasting life, resurrection. Others are going to arise, and they're going to be crowned with disgrace and contempt. Yeah, we don't want to be in that group. So we break it down. Michael, who is like El. That means there's no comparison. There is no angelic majesty that can ever be his competitor. There is none who can ever prevail in any struggle with him. So this angel who has the attribute of El Michael That's his name, Michael. So that is his attribute. That is the aspect of the divine that we see in Michael. Israel is his principality. He's the great prince who stands guard over the sons of your people. Now, we don't pray to Michael. We pray to the one who created and appointed Michael. And at the end of days, remember, Daniel has not been praying to angels, even though angels are sent to talk to him. He's been praying to the Holy One. Now, the answer could come through an angel, but we don't pray to the angel. So he's saying that at the end of days, Israel is going to arise from tribulation to inherit the kingdom. He's going to bring Michael's domain, his principality. It is now going to rise above, instead of just kind of being a helper to help these beast kingdoms move out of the way at their appointed time, because ultimately he represents the end of the beast kingdoms. He has that power of dominion, saying, no matter what you are, no matter what you do, you don't have my dominion. You don't have my authority over the house of Israel. Even if you think you're controlling them, you're not. I am. So he's going to, at this time, Michael is going to arise at the time of King Messiah, Yeshua. And that will be eternal. That will be an eternal dominion. But until then, he might be called upon to fight for Israel in its exile. And he might have to fight against these princes who are standing guard over the beast principalities, preserving them until that appointed time where they will sink and another will rise. But all of this is just to help us see that an angel reflects the quality, not just of its assigned person or people in its dominion, but also their name can reflect the quality of their creator, a quality of El. So you can see that divine quality in them. And so we could see, even that conversation with Esau, I see your face like the face of Elohim. Well, the Elohim he struggled with, it could have both reflected the face of Esau, where at the very same time, what is your name? That divine name that was placed in that angel could reflect the particular quality of Elohim that Jacob was trying to understand, explain what's happening to me right here. Right, so let's look at something very interesting. And this, we're going to compare two verses. The first one here, because it's the name, Michamocha, who is like you. If you want to understand Michael, who was like El, then you go back again to the first uses. Who was like. So the first here, this is going to be in the context of the crossing of the Reed Sea. And remember, he's destroyed Pharaoh and the chariots and the horses and the soldiers, all that. And so they sing the song of the sea. They say, Michamocha be'elim Adonai, Michamocha nedar bakodesh, nora tehilot oseh feleh. Who is like you among the, who? The Elim, the gods. Are they literally God? No, but they have some appointed power. So who is like you among the gods? Yod He Vav He. Who is like you? Majestic in holiness, awesome in praises, working wonders. Pele, or Fele, in this particular instance, goes back to the Pele, where the angel says, why are you asking my name? Seeing it as Pele. It's wonderful. So you see this wonderful miracle working aspect of Adonai reflected in that angel. Right here, you can see Oseh Fele. This is the maker of wonders, the doer of miracles. So who is like you? Michael. What quality is he bringing to us? He was showing Daniel the incomparable position of Yod He Vav He. Even the prince of Persia cannot withstand Yod He Vav He, who is like him. But notice Michael, who is like you, who is like El, is also the guardian over the sons of Israel. Where can we see this? Where do we see an identical pattern? Well, we flip over to another song. We start reading around the Song of Moses. So we go to Deuteronomy 33:29, and this is a section of the Torah where they're poised. They're poised to cross the Jordan. They're poised to cross over. And he says, blessed are you, Israel, who is like you. Wow. So who is Michamocha? Same term, just like you saw in who is like you among the gods, O Lord. It's part of the liturgy. Well, Michamocha, who is like Israel. It says, a people saved by the Lord, the shield of your help, and he who is the sword of your majesty. See, if we have any majesty at all, it's a reflection of his majesty, just like an angel's name is going to be a reflection of some divine attribute that's been dispatched to us. It says, so your enemies will cringe before you. Remember what Michael did to the prince of Persia? He's sitting there just fighting Gabriel, and then Michael shows up. Step aside. Just step aside. You have the dominion. You have the authority over Israel. It's in your name, Michael, who is like El, and who is like Israel, a people saved by the Lord. So your enemies will cringe. Prince of Persia, step out of the way, and you will trample their high places. So again, it's in the context of passing over the Jordan. They're about to cross over. And remember, avar in Hebrew means to cross over, and it's also the sheresh of Hebrew, one who has crossed over. One who has crossed over where? Well, first the Euphrates, referring back to Abraham, but in the future, one who will avar, one who will cross over into the garden, cross over into eternal life. And so in that context, Michamocha, Yisrael, who is like you, a people saved by the Lord, who is like you, your enemies will cringe before you, who is like you, a people who are going to be able to cross back over into the garden and not die. So we are a reflection of him, the same way Michael reflects this dominion of Adonai. Israel also reflects the dominion of Adonai. They can look at us and they have to say Michamocha, Bal-Geverut, right? There's no one like him, none. And so they should see that in us. There's nothing comparable to it. And so let's look at this, Exodus 15:15, going back to the Song of the Sea, who is like you, O Lord among the gods. It goes on, it says, then the chiefs of Edom were terrified. Remember, Edom is Seir. Edom and Seir are Rome. Edom, Seir, and Rome are the red beast, the last beast kingdom that's mixed among the nations of the earth. The chiefs of Edom were terrified. The leaders of Moab, trembling grips them. All the inhabitants of Canaan have despaired. Terror and dread. Remember, we studied this verse. It says it's in the future. Terror and dread will fall upon them. By the greatness of your arm, they are motionless as a stone until your people pass over Avar, Lord, until the people pass over Avar, whom you have purchased. You will bring them and plant them in the mountain of your inheritance, the place, Lord, which you have made as your dwelling, the sanctuary, Lord, which your hands have established. The Lord shall reign forever and ever. There is his dominion. There is the Michael, the Michamocha aspect of the angel Michael. His dominion is forever and ever. He's the one who sets up kingdoms and takes them back down. And then when he decides, his kingdom reigns forever and ever. But what's important here is the chiefs of Edom were terrified in the future. Remember the red beast? That's Edom. He will be terrified. Terror and dread will fall upon them, not just the crossing of the sea. In the future, when Israel, the house of Israel crosses, when they pass over, when we see them as Hebrews, and it's given twice. So we know they will cross over the Jordan with Yehoshua, but in the future, we will cross over with Yeshua. See the two prophecies embedded in there by using it twice? Why do you have to say until your people pass over, Lord, until the people pass over? Unless you're prophesying that this will happen twice. It happened under Yehoshua and it will happen under Yeshua. We will cross over because Michael is that divine attribute of eternal, incomparable authority to reign. And it's reflected in us. Who is like you, Israel? Well, what are we saying? Who is like El? Who is like him? And so when Edom, when the last beast kingdom sees Israel go into the wilderness, when he sees them beginning to observe the feast, again, the Ohel Moed, when they see that divine presence begin to descend and gather them together, the beast will know his time is short. Just remember, his authority derives from the dragon. I don't think it says it's from the Holy One. His authority derives from the dragon. So he knows his time is short. He has to know his time is short because they won't stay in the wilderness forever. They will go in, they will go over the Jordan, and they will go to Jerusalem, and they will inherit the Holy Land. So he will see that the end of his assigned time of power is nearly over. And if he knows that it's just like the Prince of Persia, he could see his own writing on the wall, just like Belshazzar saw the writing on the wall for the end of Babylon. The Prince of Persia could see the writing on the wall. Persia is going to decline, and Greece is going to come up. So when Edom sees Israel in the wilderness, and I think it begins in the wilderness of the peoples, and he sees what's happening, that's going to be terrifying to him because he knows his time is short, that Michael is about to rise up, like was said to Daniel. And if the dominion of the Holy One rises up, then this is the end. Turn out the lights. Turn out the lights, disguising themselves as light when they are truly just darkness, right? All right, so that's a great place to stop, I think, till next week. And I hope that helped us kind of work out the after class discussion from last night, where we're like, what's going on with these angels? What is your name? Why are you asking my name? That's why you want to ask a name sometimes. If you suspect you're dealing with something that's otherworldly, ask a name. You know, you don't have to have a big dialogue, but ask a name, like, what is your purpose? And you'll be able to tell fairly quickly, I believe, whether that purpose is righteous and truthful and comes from the throne itself, or whether that purpose is perhaps not clean. You know, Yeshua had some conversations with unclean things, but they recognized his dominion and where his power and authority was derived from. But it's not something you want to go around having conversations with what you think are demons. That's not something you should work on. Don't invite that into your life if you don't have to have it, especially right now, because we're in the straits. Oops, I forgot to stop the recording.